All right, we are moving on to another key concept from our test, which is the 5-number summary and creating a stem and leaf plot. And it's also tying in your understanding of a stem and leaf plot because you're not given a data set in a list, but instead you're giving it as a stem and leaf plot, and you have to determine your list from there. So let's get started. All right, so the directions say the stem and leaf plot to the right shows the number of students that attended math intervention each day over the last 2 weeks. So we know that's what the stem and leaf plot represents. And the first question it asks us to answer is, on how many days did more than 11 students attend math intervention? So the very first thing we're going to want to do with this stem and leaf plot is convert it to a list of data rather than in the stem and leaf plot. Could you still read it as a stem and leaf plot? Yes, you could, but it might make it a little bit easier for us for the rest of this problem to make it into a list. Okay, so the way we read it is we first need to go ahead and take an eye and look at the key. So in this case, the key shows us that 1/2 equals 12. What that tells us is when we combine the stem and the leaf, it's going to give us 12. So that means that the stem in this case represents the tens place and the leaf would represent the ones place in this case. Okay, so let's go ahead and expand our whole list. Remember, you're combining your stem and your leaf to make the value. So we would combine 0, 4 on that first line to give us 0, 4, which is the same as just 4. Typically, I wouldn't write 0, 4, but the reason I'm doing it now is I just want you to understand that we combine the stem and the leaf. So we combine the next stem and leaf to get us 0, 6, and the next stem and leaf to get us 0, 8. Of course, those are just the same as 4, 6, and 8. Once again, the reason I showed you that is because a lot of students with that first line get confused and think that you just use the part on the right, which isn't true. All right, so the next one, we combine those two. So 1 and 1 makes 11. 1 and 2 makes 12. 1 and 4 gives us 14. And 1 and 5 gives us 15. And then the final value would be 20. So remember, each of the values in the stem and leaf plot just represents a student that attended, it shows the students that attended math intervention each day over the last 2 weeks. So it tells us how many students attended math intervention on a certain day. So if this question asks us on how many days did more than 11 students attend math intervention, all we would have to do is find the ones that are more than 11. So we have 12, we have 14, we have 15, and we have 20. Those are all more than 11. Would 11 be considered here? It wouldn't, because 11 isn't more than 11. So that means in this case, we would say, or I guess it's how many days. So I should say 4 days was how many days. I'm sorry, that keeps happening. 4 days was how many days students, more than 11 students attended math intervention. All right, so the next one says, use the data to find the 5-number summary and create a box and whisker plot. So we're definitely going to need a little bit more room for that. But before we get started on that, let's talk about the 5 things included in a 5-number summary. Hopefully you remember that those, of course, are the minimum, which is your lowest value, quartile 1, quartile 2, quartile 3, and your maximum, which is your highest value. And let's go ahead and solve for these on the following page so we have a little bit more room. So we have our data set right there in front of us with the stem and leaf plot to the right. And let's go ahead and find our 5-number summary. So let's start off with the minimum. Remember, minimum is really easy. It's just the smallest value. When your data is in order, it will just be the one on the very left. So in this case, our minimum value is 4. What about our maximum? Another really easy one. That's your biggest value. When your data is in order, it'll be on the right. So our maximum is 20. So we're just left with 3 other things we need to find, which is our quartile 1, quartile 2, and quartile 3. So if you remember, quartile 2 is the same as a median. And remember, a median is the center of our data when the values are in order. So let's go ahead and start with our quartile 2. Because the quartile 1 is going to be the median of the lower half, and the quartile 3 is going to be the median of the upper half. So I like to X the values until I get to the middle. So I'm going to do that. Make sure you have an even amount of X's on both sides. In this case, we have 3 on both sides, and then we end up with 2 values in the middle. We can't ever have 2 medians, so we have to find the value that's in between 11 and 12. And remember, the way we do that is by finding the mean. So that means we add the 2 values, and we would divide by how many there are. And remember, we're only talking about the 2 values, so then we're going to divide by 2. 11 plus 12 is going to give us 23, and 23 divided by 2 is going to give us 11 and a half. Ask yourself quickly if that makes sense, that 11 and a half is in between 11 and 12, and it does, so we know we made no simple mistake there. All right, let's move on to our quartile 1. So quartile 1 is the median of our lower half of data. And when we are making our lower half of data, in this case where we have an even amount of values, we're just going to split it right down the middle. If we didn't have an even number of values though, and we just had 1 in the middle, the median, we would not include the median. But in this case, since it is even, like I said, we will include it. So I'm just going to erase this so you know that the 11's included. All of these 4 values to the left are our lower half of data, and now we're finding the median of those. Of course, we have 4 values, so we're going to end up with 2 in the middle again. These 2 are going to be 6 and 8. So we're going to add those values, and then we're going to divide by 2, remember, because we have to find the average, which is going to tell us the number that's in between 6 and 8. When you add 6 and 8, you get 14. When you divide that by 2, you get 7. And just a friendly reminder, you can absolutely use a calculator as long as you're showing your work. All right, so we found our quartile 1 to be 7. Last step, we need to find our quartile 3. It's going to be the same process. Our quartile 3 is the median of the upper half of data, which is the higher half. And we're going to use that same process. So we're going to X those off, and we're going to find these 2 numbers in the middle, which are 14 and 15. We're going to add those values to get 29. And then we're going to divide by 2, and that's going to give us 14 and a half. All right, so we have all 5 of our values from our 5-number summary. So we are going to complete the very last step of creating a box and whisker plot. The way we create a box and whisker plot is we first have to create a scale. So to make a scale that makes sense with your data set, you want to look at your data and understand the range of your data. So our lowest value is 4 and our highest value is 20. That means our number line has to include at least all of those values. But we don't always want to go by 1 because sometimes our data will have a large range, so we can go by something a little bit different. In this case, since my data goes from 4 to 20, I'm going to go by 4s. You could have went by something different, but I'm just going to say I'm going to go by 4s and do 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20, just because that seemed to work very well with this set. If you want to, you can put little dashes in between to represent the other values. That way you know you are accurate when you're posting these. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. You do not need to label all those numbers. That is just extra work. And you wouldn't have to necessarily put all those points there. It's just going to make my box and whisker plot a little bit more accurate. All right, so your last step is you're just going to put 1 point above where each of those numbers from your 5-number summary are. So we have a 4. I'm going to put a dot there. Quartile 1 is 7. I'm going to put a dot right where 7 would be. Quartile 2 is 11 and a half, so I'm going to put it right here in between 11 and 12. Quartile 3 is 14 and a half, so it would go about right here. And your final one, the max, is 20, so I'm going to put it right here. We're almost done. All you have to do now is draw a line in between all of those values. And then I always say quartiles have a tile around them because that's your box part of the whisker plot. I always remember as quartiles, just like a tile is a box, you put a little tile around those and you're all set. That's your box and whisker plot.